How far does a mother's limit go when the system fails? What happens in the human mind when the monster who destroyed the life of a teenage girl walks free on the streets, smiling and enjoying the freedom he stole from her family? A man did something terrible to Maria del Carmen's daughter, and as if that weren't enough, he even mocked the whole situation. Maria decided she wouldn't let it slide and chose to take justice into her own hands. This is one of the most famous cases in Spain, where a mother pushed to the limit and dissatisfied with the judicial system, decided to settle things another way. Hey everyone, how are you doing? Welcome to another video here on the channel. And in today's video, I'm going to talk about the Maria del Carmen case, an incident that happened in Spain, where a mother decided to take justice into her own hands. This mother, by the way, is even known in Spain as Mother Courage. Well, as you already know, if you enjoy my content, leave a like and a comment because it really helps me out with my work here. That's about it. So without further ado, let's get into the video. To understand how everything happened, let's go back to the beginning and get to know the two central figures of this whole story. On one side, Maria del Carmen Garcia, a dedicated mother whose life revolved around the well-being of her home and her children. On the other, Antonio Cosme Velasco, a neighbor who hid a predatory nature behind a facade of daily normalcy. He was seen as a normal man and above any suspicion. Two lives destined to cross paths in a devastating way, not just once, but twice. To understand the entire context of this story, we first need to return to the year 1998, when the peace and security of a quiet rural community was shattered forever. Benejuzar was the typical Spanish village where house doors used to be left unlocked. A place with fewer than 6,000 inhabitants, where raising children was shared visually by neighbors and violent crime seemed like something distant, restricted to big cities. The residents were certainly not used to seeing in the news the type of crime that I'm about to narrate for you. Maria del Carmen's family was completely accustomed to this peaceful routine. They sought a simple life, guided by hard work and the hope of giving their children a dignified future. Among them was Veronica, a young girl who, at the end of the 1990s, was entering adolescence at the age of 13. Veronica was described by those close to her as a docile, studious girl who was very attached to her mother. Maria del Carmen saw in her daughter the reflection of herself when she was younger. The girl's routine was predictable: school, homework, and small trips to the local shops whenever her mother asked. Nothing indicated that danger lived just a few meters away. Just a few steps from the family's residence lived Antonio Cosme Velasco, a man whose presence in the village was common, but who carried traits of manipulative behavior, silently observing the routine of the residents, waiting for a propitious opportunity to act and put his most sordid thoughts into practice. October 17, 1998 was supposed to be like any other day, but it was on this day that the fate of Maria del Carmen's family changed forever. Veronica, then 13 years old, left home with a simple mission: to go to the local bakery to buy bread for her family. It was a short route that she had already taken hundreds of times, but on the way, Antonio Cosme Velasco, the neighbor who had been watching her for months, approached her. Armed with a razor, Antonio threatened Veronica, who was paralyzed with fear. The girl was dragged by force to an isolated area, a pine forest on the outskirts of the village, far from anyone who could help her or hear her. In that place, Antonio forced relations with Veronica under constant threat. However, the moments of terror did not end with the physical act. Before releasing her, while the girl cried on the ground, the attacker pointed the razor at her and demanded an oath. He made her promise that she would never tell anyone what had happened there. The man looked into the eyes of the 13-year-old girl, saying that if she told anyone, he would come after her to take her life. Terrified, Veronica swore and returned home, willing to keep that oath out of fear of what might happen to her or even to her family. In the days that followed, the change in Veronica's behavior was drastic, but fear kept her silent. She withdrew, stopped smiling, and her academic performance plummeted. The trauma was so overwhelming that the young woman attempted to end her own life twice in the following months. It was the beginning of a long and painful journey of psychological and psychiatric treatments. Maria del Carmen knew that something terrible had happened to her daughter, but the truth only came to light when medical exams and the young girl's emotional collapse made it impossible to hide the secret. After Maria discovered the terrible secret her daughter had been forced to keep, she went to the police. The police began investigations immediately and went after Antonio to interrogate him. As expected, Antonio completely denied all accusations at first. He tried to claim innocence and discredit the victim's testimony. However, forensic science played a crucial role in the case. Detailed laboratory analysis of the clothes Veronica was wearing on the day of the crime revealed traces of genetic material. The DNA match left no room for doubt. The profile corresponded perfectly to that of Antonio Cosme Velasco. With that, his denial collapsed in the face of the irrefutable physical evidence gathered by Spanish investigators. Antonio's trial drew the full attention of the local community. To the surprise and indignation of the victim's family, the process revealed a cruel side of society at the time. Some residents questioned Veronica's version. They said it was very strange that Veronica kept going to school after everything that had happened to her. According to them, this made no sense, because if she had truly been the victim of what she claimed, she would not even have been able to leave her house. Despite all this, and the suspicion from some residents of the village, the scientific evidence and Veronica's compelling testimony ensured Antonio's conviction. The court sentenced him to a prison term of 9 years, in addition to the payment of financial compensation fixed at 3 million pesetas, the equivalent of about 18,000 euros. For Maria del Carmen and her family, the sentence brought temporary relief, but the feeling that 9 years was a very low price for the psychological destruction of a 13-year-old girl remained as an open wound. Little did they know that the prison system would make that sentence even shorter. The years passed, but for the Garcia family, time seemed to have stopped in 1998. Veronica grew up with deep trauma. She herself would later declare that she had no longer felt alive since the day of the terrible event. Anxiety attacks were daily. The fear of going out on the street was constant, and reliance on psychiatric support shaped her youth. Maria del Carmen, for her part, developed a severe depressive disorder. She lived under the effect of strong daily medications, consumed by the pain of seeing her daughter wither away emotionally day after day without being able to bring back her joy of living. In June 2005, the unthinkable happened. Antonio had not served his full sentence in a closed regime, but the Spanish penitentiary system granted him a temporary one-day release benefit. Without the victim's family being properly notified or protected by an effective restraining order, the man took a ride and returned directly to the village of Benejuzar. He walked the very same streets where his victim was trying to move on with her life. It was around 10:30 in the morning on June 13th. Maria del Carmen had left the house to settle daily matters and was waiting for the bus at a stop near a gas station, about 330 feet from her residence. In a bar located close to the bus stop, Maria saw Antonio entering. She froze for a few seconds. She could not believe that the man who had caused so much pain to her family years before was already free, enjoying his liberty just a short distance from her house. Destiny willed that the two would cross paths directly in this bar near the bus stop, which at the time stood where the white concrete wall seen today is located. Instead of showing shame, remorse, or trying to walk away to avoid causing more pain to the family, Antonio acted with great cynicism. Upon spotting the mother of the girl whose life he had ruined, he smiled provocatively and disdainfully. He approached her and uttered the sentence that would destroy what little sanity Maria del Carmen had left. "Hey, how is your daughter?" That was not just a greeting. It was a sadistic reminder of the power he had exerted over the family. A direct provocation that echoed in that mother's mind like the old threats he had made to her daughter before being imprisoned. At that very moment, something inside Maria del Carmen broke for good. Years of accumulated pain, the daily suffering of seeing her daughter depressed, and the imminent fear that the aggressor would carry out his old threats triggered an overwhelming outburst. Consumed by a blind rage, she walked to a gas station just a few meters away. She bought an empty plastic bottle and filled it with gasoline. At that moment, Maria couldn't think of anything else except making sure that what happened to her daughter would never happen again. Maria del Carmen returned to the bar where Antonio was consuming his drink. Without hesitating, she entered the establishment, approached the man before he could make any defensive reaction, and poured the entire contents of the gasoline bottle over his body. Then, with hands trembling but driven by an uncontrollable force, she struck the match and threw it at him. In seconds, flames engulfed the attacker who minutes before was mocking what he had done to Maria's daughter. The bar turned into a scene of screams and general panic. While the fire consumed Antonio, people at the scene ran in desperation. Some customers tried to put out the flames that had spread throughout the bar. Maria del Carmen, however, entered a deep catatonic state of shock. She was overtaken by panic, but her reaction was not to flee. She remained motionless at the scene. With a choked voice, she looked at the frightened people around her and quickly confessed what she had done, explaining that that man had destroyed her daughter's life. She sat down and waited patiently for the arrival of the Spanish Guardia Civil vehicles to be arrested red-handed. After her arrest, Maria was charged with serious bodily harm and later with attempted murder. Antonio was rescued alive, but his condition was critical. He was rushed to the burn unit of a large hospital, presenting severe second and third-degree burns over more than 60% of his body. He survived for only a few days, passing away in the hospital due to severe complications and infections caused by the chemical attack. With the death of the attacker, Maria del Carmen's legal status changed instantly. She was no longer facing a charge of grievous bodily harm or attempted murder. The investigation was now formally for completed murder. The news of the attacker's death at the hands of the victim's mother spread through Spain quickly. Almost immediately, public opinion split heatedly. For the vast majority of the population who were outraged by the laxity of the judicial system, Maria del Carmen was not a criminal, but a vigilante. She was dubbed by the press and the people as Mother Courage. Several people took to the streets to protest in her favor. Due to the huge repercussion of the case, there were countless debates about it. Legal scholars, psychologists, and politicians discussed the limits of justice and the dangers of taking justice into one's own hands. On one side, people who were in favor of Maria said that the state had failed to guarantee her safety and that of her family. On the other, people who were against what she did said she should have called the police and waited for the state to do its job. In July 2009, Maria del Carmen sat on the defendant's bench at the Provincial Court of Alicante. The prosecution called for a harsh sentence, arguing that there was premeditation at the moment she went to buy the fuel. The defense attorney, Joaquin Gallant, focused entirely on the defendant's mental health. Medical testimony and psychiatric reports detailed the years of chronic sadness, post-traumatic stress, and the state of temporary mental alienation generated by the attacker's mockery. Initially, Maria was sentenced by the court to a severe penalty of 9.5 years in prison. The defense did not accept the initial verdict and appealed to higher courts. About a year later, the case reached the Supreme Court of Spain. The Supreme Court judges reviewed the case and decided to overturn the sentence. As a result, Maria's sentence was reduced to 5.5 years in prison. This reduction of the sentence did not calm the spirits of the population. A massive signature collection campaign was launched across Spain demanding a full pardon from the Spanish government for Maria del Carmen Garcia. Thousands of citizens, moved by that mother's tragedy, signed the manifestos. Veronica, now a young adult, became the public voice of the family, giving emotional interviews where she stated that her mother acted to protect her from the monster who continued to terrify them. However, the bureaucracy of the Ministry of Justice showed resistance to granting the pardon. After years of battles and appeals to suspend the execution of the sentence, the request for a full pardon was still being reviewed. Eventually, the court ran out of time. On May 8, 2014, judicial orders determined that Maria had to serve her sentence. Thus, she entered the Fontcalent prison. Due to her extremely weakened mental health status and the risk of physical collapse, prison authorities chose to keep her in the medical and psychiatric wing of the institution. Shortly thereafter, in June 2014, the Supreme Court formally rejected the final appeal against the government's decision to deny the full pardon. Despite the denial of the pardon by the Madrid government, Maria del Carmen's exemplary conduct inside the prison and continuous medical reports regarding her psychic vulnerability opened other legal doors. The prison's technical team and the prison supervision judge began granting regime progressions to her. Maria del Carmen progressed quickly to the so-called third prison degree, a semi-liberty system where the inmate only needs to return to the prison institution to spend the night or comply with strict home monitoring regimes with an electronic ankle monitor. The prison journey of Maria del Carmen Garcia reached its final chapter of incarceration in November 2017. In view of her serving a substantial part of the stipulated sentence, and medical reports certifying that she represented no danger to society, the Spanish justice system reviewed her case. She was ultimately granted the definitive benefit of parole. After years divided between the trauma of what happened to her daughter, the violent act at the bar, the grueling trials, and life inside Fontcalent prison, Mother Courage could finally return to her loved ones. She was finally free from behind bars, though the emotional scars would remain forever. Today, Maria del Carmen Garcia, her daughter Veronica, and the rest of the family live a completely private life, far from the media spotlight that once surrounded them. They seek the anonymity and peace that were stolen from them on an afternoon in 1998. Well, everyone, that's it. Let me know in the comments what you thought about this case and whether you already knew about it or not. Thank you so much for watching until the end. A big hug and see you next time.